Books in the Biz, a podcast that looks at both the financial and operational sides of success. Please welcome our hosts, Dan Paulson and Richard Veltre. Dan is the CEO of Envision Development International, and he works with leaders to increase sales and profits through great cultures with solid operations. Rich is CEO of the Veltre Group and a financial strategist working with companies to manage their money more effectively. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, back to Books in the Biz. Today we talk about government compliance because it's so much fun. I'm not going to hide my feelings on this today, Rich. I think this is another one of those things where we get to jump through more hoops, and God forbid you didn't know about this hoop. Now, hopefully by now you've heard something about it, but I know that there's times where you forget to do something or you don't realize you have to do something, then you get penalized, then you do it, and then you ask for forgiveness and they go, well, it doesn't matter that you didn't know, you should have known.
Yeah.
Well, great. So we're doing our civic duty today to let you know about, at this time, I think is getting more known. I'm seeing more posts about it now. But up until now, I haven't really heard anything about it. And for those who are watching, I was kind enough to pull up the government website this is associated with. So the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. You naughty people, what are you doing that I now have to fill out another report? Rich, you're the finance guy, and actually I'm starting to hear about this from the accountant. So this is directly linked to tax accounting in some way, shape, or form, though it's not directly linked in that most of the accountants are starting to talk about it. Indirectly linked that you have to file yourself. I don't think the accountant can file for you, but Rich, maybe you can enlighten me on the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and the BOIS report that you now have to file before the end of the year.
Yeah, so accountants like myself, we only work when there's a pending in deadline.
This one's coming up.
So I'll slap my own wrist for a second. But if you had an entity, you had a business that you registered with the Secretary of State, and this is actually the directions that, if you're a sole proprietor and you're just working under your own name and you did not go out and actually register the business through a Secretary of State, then you are not included in this list. Okay. But if you set up LLCs, S corps, etc., up to a certain dollar amount of revenue, you have to go here and file a beneficial ownership report, which is what the BOI stands for. Okay. This law, I forget what year, a couple of years ago, and I forget which law it was, but I'm sure somewhere in this detail you'll see. But in the law, they said that they wanted everybody to register one time, unless you had to go in and change information. But other than that, you're doing this one time. So if you had an entity that was formed before January 1st of 2024, you have the full year to go in and do your beneficial ownership report. You go to their website, you fill out, I think there's 4 pieces of information, which are like name, address, driver's license. It's not an extensive report. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need, extensive number of advisors. I think it's just basically, if you own it, go in and put your name on it and, file
you
it.
Do need images of your documentation, though, so get ready to take a picture of your driver's license and turn that in.
Okay. So I think you still can appoint someone to do it for you.
Okay.
I believe you can. Now, I haven't actually done my own.
Shame.
Yeah, I know, because I'm technically, while I could probably make the argument that I'm an accounting firm, like I'm really more of a consulting firm. So the likelihood is I don't fit the definition. Okay. But accountants don't actually have to file it. They're in the exempt list. So yeah. So I basically haven't done mine yet, but it looks to me like it's relatively easy. And I had planned on going ahead and doing this because, I was formed in 2020. I don't remember, 2022. We set these entities up for myself. So, and yes, I went through Secretary of State to do it, so I'm on the list. So I know that I have to file these by the end of the year. Now, if you filed for a new entity in that same way in 2024, you had 90 days to do it. So if you haven't done it already and you filed at the beginning of the year, I would jump up and down and run around and go find out how to do this because you're late. Um, so, and I believe that just to give people sort of a reasoning why the government decided to do this, I think it all goes back to the fact that if you think about it, there's a lot of people out there who have filed to set up a single member LLC. So even though you filed for a single member LLC, which is through a Secretary of State, you don't have a separate tax filing, okay? It gets included in your personal tax return. So the government has kind of lost track of the businesses that are operating in the United States. So they don't know who's out there. So they're basically saying everybody has to file because that will give them sort of a roadmap of who owns what. Because if you think about it, if I go back to some of the advice I've given to people, we've set up sort of a master LLC, and then we've had separate LLCs for little group activities.
Okay.
I used to call it the master, the sort of mothership concept. Okay. So you file one tax return, and then legally you set up separate entities, whether it's for real estate properties, whether it's for things that somehow you want to be legally separate. Okay. Those entities don't file separate tax returns. They file as part of the parent, which is great because I've got 10 or so legally separated businesses running, but I only file one tax return. My accountant only, puts everything together and files once. So I pay one fee. But the government can't see the 10 smaller entities. And that's why they're basically saying you have to go back and tell us who owns what. Because now they're trying to get back in some kind of control over what entities are actually operating in the United States. They don't actually know. Because
So here's the 5-year-old in me, Rich, going, why? I still don't understand why, because
yeah,
ultimately I look at this from a taxation point of view. They're
Yeah.
getting the tax because all that money flows through the entity, as you put it, and you pay for it through your personal taxes.
yeah,
Who cares if you got 10 different LLCs and they all roll into one and then that one pays? In my opinion, as long as you paid the tax and you've done your legal duty to do so, tough.
yeah.
Don't make more work for me, because this is just something else I forget.
I don't think that I actually don't think it's a tax reason. I think they've tied it because somewhere along the line they're trying to get all of the legitimate people
Mm-hmm.
to file, and that way the people who are not legitimate will kind of stand out in the ether there. That everybody else has filed except you. Why didn't you file? Okay. And I kind of go back to the old movies that always say, well, we don't know who owns that building because it's a really complicated structure and there's 57 different entities underneath it. When you finally get down to it, you have no idea who still owns the company.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, is what they're trying to get around. I think there's some things out there that they know people are operating. There's some networks that are working with, sort of these single member LLCs that they don't have track of who's who. And I think it takes too many people out of their sight,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not necessarily saying too many of the good people, because I think there's plenty of good people who are just going to do this and it's going to be over and it's no big deal. But there's going to be plenty of other people who are going to go, I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing. Well, you're the person they're after. you know? So I
And they
don't
won't self-report anyway for that very reason.
yeah. So it's not, I truly don't believe that this is a tax reason. I don't believe it's anything other than the fact that the laws around the single member LLCs and the kind of disregarded entities and the laws around that have kind of given too much shelter to the things that are out there, and they want to get a handle on it. So, I mean, if you think about it, LLCs are all formed at the state level.
Mm.
So The federal government doesn't have a database of who formed other than the IRS. So if the IRS, got an EIN request, then they do have a database. But again, who knows if they're all tied in? Because those LLCs could operate with cash, never have to open a bank account, never hire an employee. Maybe they didn't ask for an EIN because they don't have those two things. So it's possible. So that's
Yeah.
why I think this is a one-time push to get everybody to register, and then they have files.
Well, I have filled them out, and they aren't overly tedious. I mean, it's if you've got the information you need, you need, it takes you roughly 3 to 5 minutes, I'd say, to fill it out beginning to end. For those who are listening, some of the key information you need is your EIN. So I do have a question about that, because there are certain entities that you do create that you might not have an EIN for because, as you pointed out, it's a pass through to another LLC. Well, okay, if it's asking for an EIN and I don't have an EIN for that particular LLC, then what do I do? The other information you need, as you highlighted, is some personal form of documentation to prove who you are, i.e., a driver's license, I think maybe a passport, social security number can be used as well, I believe. There's like 3 different documents. I just went with the driver's license because that was the easiest one. And I know that number by heart, so that made it super easy for me. But so that's really all the information asked for. It's not going into much more detail. Oh, your and the address, so your physical address of where the entity is located. So that's really about all you need. But I will be curious in those situations, for example, and I'll use the example, we have a LLC for a property we own. It's in a different state. In order to do things in that state, we had to get an LLC set up because we couldn't use our LLC in Wisconsin in that state. That one does not have an EIN because that LLC just basically transfers into our other one here. How are we going to report that one?
That's a great question.
Because if that's the problem we're trying to fix, I'm not really sure that's going to do it.
Well,
because I'm not going to get an EIN for something. Actually, they've changed the rules down there, so now we don't have room tax that we got to pay. So that creates another problem. I got to get rid of that. So that's a different story, but that's for another day.
Yeah, I started taking a look at. I'm flipping through this while on camera for anybody who can't see me. There's a very extensive, frequently asked questions. For something that's supposed to be super sensitive, super simple. It's typical government 600 pages. So I may have to go look that up somewhere because I don't see it. You would think that would be one of the first questions, in the frequently asked questions. But if that's what I need and I don't have one, how do I file? I don't know. I'll try to find out. Maybe we could do a supplement and say, hey, by the way, last week's podcast, we had this open question. But yeah, I don't have an answer, unfortunately, to that piece because, again, some of the intention, this is what I think they're doing. This is what I think is the, sort of answer why. But, as in typical fashion, the how is probably the bigger nuisance.
Yes, it is. So some things to keep in mind with this. So why are we talking about this? I think we've kind of figured out, okay, this is something you need to do. As I've mentioned in the description to this podcast, if you do not do it by the end of the year, you could be subject to fines of $500 per day for every day it is not filed past then.
Yes.
So it doesn't take long to do the math on it to realize that
it's a big one.
In 2 weeks, you could have a pretty significant fine under your belt.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
It's definitely a big one. I would not take it lightly. We actually had a meeting to go through, and I had someone start looking at every one of our clients that has tax returns and looking for what subsidiaries do you also have that might have been included in those tax returns. So we could have sort of a master list and go back to the people that are on our list and say, hey, you realize there's only, 1 quarter left. So if you've done it already, let us know so we can take you off the list and we don't hound you till the end of the year. But if you haven't done it yet and you need help, then definitely get in touch with us. Don't wait till December 31st when everybody's partying for the year end and think someone needs to be in the office to do this. They won't be there. But yeah, it's that important. The penalty, especially, is daunting enough. And I think that when they give people access to the database, which I think is the phase two of this, certain people will have access to it, and there's a nasty fine on whether if you use that information incorrectly or
Mm.
in an illegal way. I think it's like $250,000 or something is the
Ooh, so
fee.
don't do that.
So don't if you're one of those people who needs this information for whatever reason, and the government gives you sort of a license to go ahead and use it, don't use it the wrong way, because they're looking for ways to put money back in their pockets. So
Oh yeah, definitely so.
yeah,
I just had a fleeting thought pass through my head on this as you were talking here, and I'm trying to remember what I was saying. So I'm going to sit here and talk a little bit. I guess one of the key things you do. Oh, I know what it was. We kind of touched base on it at the beginning. I had heard through different sources that an accountant or somebody else cannot fill it out for you. You have to do it yourself. I will say, having filled out the report, I didn't see anywhere on there where you could kind of check a box or somebody else could say filled out on behalf of. So I kind of feel, and Rich, you can, again, this might be the addendum that we do on top of the other
yeah.
question we have, is I think you do have to fill it out yourself.
I
It
think
doesn't
it's
take
better.
that long. I
Yeah.
think with the information you need, it's going to go a lot quicker than to pass it off to, say, your accountant. Because if your accountant is kind enough to do it for you, they're going to say, "Well, I need a photocopy of X," which is going to probably be your driver's license, so that they can fill it out.
Yeah.
And then they got to track you down, and that just slows down the process. Really, you're ahead to just fill it out yourself. We've got the website up here, so for those viewing it, the website is fincen.gov.
Mhm.
If you go there, you will see all this information, the nice, scary Financial Crimes Enforcement Task Network. You'll see the BOI ownership information. I believe you can click on that. Oh, no, right here it says need to file a beneficial ownership information report. File your report now. Click the button, takes you through the process. You can either print out a PDF and fill it out that way, and I believe either electronically send it or mail it in, or you can just do the online report. I highly recommend skip all those other steps, do the online report,
Yeah.
take care of it. It's done. You will get an email back with the email you give them that lays out everything you put on that report. So you've got copy of it, and along with a like 20 or 30 digit alphanumeric confirmation code to prove that you filled it out. So it's pretty, I guess they would run out of numbers if you had to list every LLC out there. So I think that's why they did that. But it is not hard to fill out. It's just, again, it's one of those things. And we can sit here, and that's part of the reason why we're doing this. I think there are a number of entities that are now starting to get the word out about this because, as you point out, Rich, deadline's approaching. We're getting to the end of the quarter here, and it's got to be done by December 31st. So we're trying to make sure that everyone's aware of this, so you don't get the "I told you so" afterwards, even if you didn't. Because again, the government doesn't care. If you didn't know, well, you should have known. That's the stuff I hear. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if we didn't tell you. You just should figure this out because really there wasn't a lot of direct information coming from the feds on this one that I remember. I don't see any news stories. I really don't see anything. The first time I heard this mentioned was about a year ago this time. When I was talking with a colleague of mine. He says, "Hey, keep your eyes out for this." He's kind of in the financial industry, so I think he had a heads up a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
But here again, we're back to that situation where if you don't know, it doesn't matter. You're going to have to be compliant. So
Yeah.
be sure you follow up on it.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, if you go to this website, there is a frequently asked questions button somewhere on that page that I can't really see on this really small screen. But
It's hidden here somewhere, I'm
yeah,
sure.
but I think there's a frequently asked questions thing in there, and it does talk about, who can do this for you, that kind of thing. And, you know, it gets a little convoluted. So if it's a really simple deal, for the small business owners that are listening, just go in, do it yourself. It's really easy to do. If your accountant asks you, let them know, yes, I did it. If there are plenty of people out there pitching to do this for you for a
Mm-hmm.
fee.
For a fee, of
For a
course.
fee. So I don't know how those people are actually doing it, whether you have to sign a power of attorney or whether it's something else that says you're going to do that. But like you said, you have to give a driver's license. So I have a couple clients that I know I'm going to wind up having to file this for. And I've been working for them for a long, long time. So if I had to put my driver's license in, I would do it because I'm not worried that I
Right.
would be incorrect. Um, but I think to keep it nice and easy, I would just go ahead, jump on, file the forms. It's that simple. I think it's
Yep.
really just we just want to know who owns what. So for each entity, do the report, avoid the penalty, put it all in a file, and sleep well at night. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. There's no,
Hopefully.
I don't think that. Yeah, hopefully, um, but other than that, I think other people will have a little bit more difficulty, especially if they're operating with, multiple entities in a complicated structure. Then I think I would talk to your accountant or your lawyer, you know, and say, what do we have to do here?
Yeah.
What has to get done? How do we do it? Can you do it for me? And then, if at that point I would say sign the power of attorney, let them do it. Um, but for the small business owner, just go online, make sure you've done it at least for the entity that you're running, and make sure you're compliant.
Yep, exactly. It looks like the information you were talking about is actually under the beneficial ownership information icon, which is just below where it kind of talks about filing for the report.
Uh-huh.
There's like three separate icons. One's for has the BOI in it. That's the one you want to click on. It takes you to a bunch more information next to the money services, business information, e-filing, and SAR statistics.
Yeah.
So that's the one you click on. You go in there. They've got a nice little video, a 5-minute demo on how to fill out the report. They have your frequently asked questions pages that you're talking about. They have some alerts up here. It sounds like as we're talking about this, FinCEN has learned of fraudulent attempts to solicit information from individuals and entities who may be subject to reporting requirements. So this is kind of going back to what you said. Maybe those entities out there looking to make a quick buck on this might want to be careful with who you choose for that. Let's just leave it at that. But there's tons of information on here. Again, in typical government fashion, there's 100 pages to explain what should be done in 2 sentences, but they've got that covered. So that's really what you got to do, and that's what we're talking to you about today. Rich, any other things we got to bring up about this, or you think we've got it pretty well covered? It's a
I
simple
think
report.
No, I think it's pretty straightforward. Clearly, like I said, that document talking about the frequently asked questions. There's a lot of questions there. So they're really trying to cover their bases so that you don't have an issue. I would probably look there first. If you don't see the answer to your question, just reach out. There's plenty of people now that know. I mean, your accountants all know. So it's definitely been something that has been, out there at least for the last few months.
Mm-hmm.
That it's finally kind of taken hold. That this is something that has to get done. So there's plenty of people who can help you. Just know that it's out there and do what you have to do.
Good point. And if for some reason you don't know somebody, I'm sure, Rich, you could probably always help them. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Send me an email, rveltry@veltrygroup.com.
And you can, if you can't get a hold of Rich, you can always get a hold of me, though I won't be able to help you much on this one. I will probably defer you to Rich, but you can get a hold of me at danpaulsonletsgo.com. We encourage you to check out this and other episodes of Books in the Biz at BOOKS, the letter N, BIZ.com. And hopefully we have more wonderful information to share. Rich, we're getting towards the end of the year. We probably have to do an end of year accountant wrap up sometime in Q4. So I'm sure that'll be fun.
Sounds
But
good.
other than that, thank you all. Rich, till next week.
Till next week.